Hello, Brian Weeks here again with another MMCD contract consideration. This short video clip will cover the topic of avoiding setting up your firm to lose. First, a disclaimer. This video promotes training by the MMCD Association. As I'm a paid MMCD instructor, I have a conflict of interest. However, this video was requested by the association in the interest of benefiting our contractor members. So, unlike most of the other contract considerations that I've presented, which are more generally applicable, this one is targeted to the contractors who bid work on MMCD contracts. More specifically, it's targeted to contractors who don't train their staff well enough to maximize their opportunities and compensation on MMCD work. The MMCD Association was formed as a three-party group to improve municipal works contracts for the benefit of all parties. It functions with volunteers from municipalities, consulting firms, and contractors. As this slide shows, I've been one of the contractor representatives on the board and on various committees for almost 30 years. This three-perspective structure has resulted in fair contract language which balances the interests of the owner and the contractor. But having the contract balanced in writing is only part of a successful strategy. The users of the documents must know the rules and how to apply them. In my view, few contractors do this part well. As a most extreme example, I was recently told by the principal of a struggling contracting firm that the contract conditions were just guidelines and that everything was negotiable. My unspoken reaction was, no wonder this firm is struggling. With this video, I hope to convince contractors that proper training of their staff can have a very good payback. Let me make my argument by starting with an analogy. Imagine that you are about to bet on a sporting event and the following conditions exist. The other team plays often, always plays at home, and wrote the rules of the game. The referee plays often, knows the rules, and was hired by the other team. Your team plays relatively infrequently, always plays away, and is unfamiliar or uncertain of the rules. So if you wanted to place a bet on which team will be more successful, where would you place your money? Despite hoping for your team, the logical bet is on the other team. Of course, in our world, the teams are actually the two parties to the construction contract, the owner and the contractor. As the contractor, you bid work for many owners in many jurisdictions, probably under numerous contract templates, such as MMCD, MOT, CCDC, etc., etc. Each site has different contract rules, physical constraints, and legal limitations. You have little time to evaluate the tender documents to prepare your bid, and choosing how much to allow for risks is a true gamble. As team captain, your superintendent is always juggling many balls in the air, possibly handling several jobs at once in various stages of completion. He or she knows how to manage crews and subcontractors and how to build things to spec. But have you provided any training about the rules of the contract, or just handed out a roll of drawings and given directions to find the site? The owner, on the other hand, deals with very similar projects multiple times each year. They know the site intimately and have commissioned studies from consultants to know it even better. They have lots of time to prepare the tender documents, starting with a standard format, which they've modified to suit their specific needs. Beyond that, they've engaged a contract administrator to watch over the project to see that all the rules of the contract and its specifications are all followed. Despite being paid by the owner, the CA is obliged to be impartial, so the role is heavily conflicted. Sometimes inexperienced CAs do not understand this obligation. It's pretty easy to see that a contractor starts every project at a disadvantage to the home team. One of the ways to offset this disadvantage is to train your staff to understand the MMCD and use its fairness to your advantage. Over the past 25 years, the MMCD Association has conducted training about the general conditions for well over 2,200 students. From my perspective as the senior instructor and a contractor representative, it's a sad fact that under 20% of those students have come from contractors. That tells me that most contractors are not using one of the few ways available to level the playing field. It also tells me that contractors using untrained staff are at a disadvantage when it comes to dealing with the CA and the owner. Furthermore, they are also at a disadvantage when bidding against competitors who have had training. As anecdotal proof of that, I note that once one paving firm undertook training for all their staff, it was not long before the other two big operators signed up their staff too. By understanding the protections offered by the general conditions, your estimators will be confident in reducing bid risk allowances. Your field staff will be more aware of the critical nature of deadlines, be better prepared to challenge instructions from the CA or inspectors, be better equipped to negotiate change orders, and generally be more knowledgeable to protect the contractor's interests in many areas. Of course, having a fair contract is irrelevant if you don't win the contract. One of the big gambles in preparing an estimate is how much risk allowance to bid into the total. The MMCD has intentionally used 5 strategies to apportion and make clear the risk being transferred in the tender. I'll mention just 3 of them. Number 1, quantity variation protection. GC9 provides the estimator confidence that if a tender item was badly priced, the losses will stop at 115% of the tendered quantity. It also provides partial recovery of overheads and profits when tender items underrun significantly. 2, hazardous materials. GC12 provides both financial and liability protection against discovery and costs of unexpected hazardous materials. It ensures the owner retains all risks related to that situation, so the bidder does not have to allow for it. 3, unforeseen conditions. GC11 offers bidders the greatest protection in that it provides for cost recovery and markup on work that must be done but was unexpected by both owners and bidders at tender time. Again, the intent is to make it unnecessary to have a large risk allowance for unforeseen conditions built into the bid price. Estimators who understand the protections built into the standard documents can reduce the risk allowance they build in, giving their firm a better chance of being the low bidder. Any sensible business person will do a cost-benefit calculation when presented with a proposal to spend money. Training should be considered one of those opportunities. Typically, a day of training costs about $800, to which must be added the cost of the person's wages while not on the job. Let's say that totals $1,500 per person. Let me create a scenario where there is a $500,000 contract awarded, but it must be done in 100 days. Thus, an average daily revenue of $5,000. Let's further assume site overheads cost $500 a day. If the superintendent learned during the course that daily site overhead costs should be itemized on daily force account forms, then just 3 days of force account work with those noted would pay for the course. If a superintendent learned during the course that meeting a deadline to submit a dispute was absolutely mandatory and thus enabled a dispute to proceed to resolution, which would otherwise not be possible, a fraction of a favorable settlement would pay for that day's training. If a superintendent learned during the course that filing a timely notice about an owner-caused delay enabled reimbursement that would otherwise have been missed, that delay claim might enable daily overhead recovery, impact cost reimbursement, and an extension of the substantial performance date to avoid liquidated damages for the lost time. The savings in every one of these three simple examples would be less than the cost of a day's training. Yet that training would provide forever benefits for every MMCD job thereafter. How about that for a cost-benefit analysis? The things your estimators and field staff don't know about the MMCD General Conditions will cost you money and lost opportunities. You and your staff should know the answers to all of the following questions. It is critical you know which documents become contract documents. Nothing in reference documents can be used to support or deny a claim or require you to do additional work without a change order. Whose signature is required to validate a change order? Spoiler alert, not yours. What is the document hierarchy? Where is it? And how do you apply it to resolve conflicting information in the contract documents? The legal principle of contra preferentum gives the contractor a right to choose in certain situations. Knowing this could get you extra money. Do you understand the absolute obligation of the CA to be impartial? But the CA is not all-powerful. His or her authority is spoken of as deep but constrained. Could you define those limits or recognize when the CA was exceeding them? Similarly, the inspectors have only a subset of the CA's authority. Do you know the limits? How critical are the stated deadlines for submitting force account forms and dispute notices? What rights do you have, and what must you do to preserve them when an owner fails to provide necessary permits or appropriate site access in a timely way? You will be the prime contractor for worksafe purposes. Do you know what that entails? And have you built in sufficient overhead allowance to perform this task sufficiently to protect your firm? You are also designated as the payment certifier for all your subcontractors. Do you know what duties you have in this regard? Do you know that whatever amount of funds you approve for release of holdback to a subcontractor may not be altered by the CA or the owner? Are you aware that just because you've been paid for an item on one progress draw, it may be withdrawn on a subsequent one if the item is later deemed to be defective? Do you know that there are no deficiency holdbacks allowed prior to substantial performance? Do you know what you have to do to preserve your rights in situations caused by change of conditions, the discovery of hazardous materials, or delays by the owner and third parties? A critical understanding is to know the difference between an item of extra work and a change. There are very different consequences, as you can legally refuse to do something which is defined as extra work. Do your superintendents and foremen know them? Did you know the CA is required to negotiate on a change order before instructing it to be done by force account, so that you can possibly recover costs which would not otherwise be included? How would you enforce a deadline to have a controversial instruction or decision put in writing? Do you know the implications of something being listed as optional work? In particular, that the timing of the activation of optional work may give you rights to a time extension. Do you understand the restrictions on keeping the CA and superintendent out of negotiations during dispute resolution? Do you understand the rights you give up when you apply for certificates of substantial and total performance? Do you know you have a specific right to terminate a contract if the owner or an authorized third party imposes a lengthy delay? And do you know what compensation you'd be entitled to in that circumstance? Are you aware that you can compel an owner who pays late to pay interest? In the interest of keeping this video to a reasonable length, I won't go on. But if you and your staff cannot answer the majority of these questions with confidence, then I suggest you're working at a disadvantage and some training would be beneficial. The MMCD Association offers 4 general training courses, 2 of which are specifically for contractors. The Superintendent's course is a 1 full-day course which answers all of the above questions and many more. Students are provided with a copy of the current general conditions and a student guide for later reference. The second is the Foreman course. It is scheduled as an afternoon-only course, so foremen can get the crew set and the day's work progressing before attending the course. The course content is specifically targeted to the issues that might arise between a foreman and an inspector or the CA. Again, students receive a student guide for later reference. Our main course is the Contract Administrators course, primarily intended for CAs who wish to become MMCD certified. It's a 2-day course, but the first day is spent entirely discussing the preparation of a contract, its tendering and award. The second day deals with the intricacies of performing the seriously conflicted role of CA. Contractor representatives are welcome to attend and frequently offer useful insights that the CAs would not otherwise hear. Contractor representatives come away with a better understanding of the limits of the role of the CA and hence how to make submissions to a CA that have a better chance of acceptance. Students are provided with a copy of the current general conditions and a student guide for later reference. The final course is a 1-day course for inspectors to help them understand their role under the MMCD contract and limitations. Students are provided with a copy of the current general conditions and a student guide for later reference. Most contractors put themselves at a disadvantage versus owners and CAs by having less well-trained staff. 2, most contractors put themselves at a disadvantage versus their competitors who have better trained staff. 3, the MMCD Association has training courses specifically for superintendents and foremen. And 4, given the responsibilities of superintendents and foremen, training has exceedingly good payback opportunities and ratios. I sincerely hope this video will promote more executives of contracting firms to reconsider training their staff. I'm biased, of course, but I'm firmly convinced that it will be some of the best money a contractor can invest. As a final comment, the course feedback from the superintendent's course shows 88% of the students thought their time and money was well spent, and 94% of the students would recommend it to others. I hope that this has helped clarify this contract consideration. Please check out our website for further assistance and to see what other topics are presented in this series. Thanks for watching.